I've been very careful to not grow too big too fast. A lot of times the software companies do that, and then there's the little growing pain that would have been just a little bump ends up being a massive speed bump. We've been very careful to make sure we don't run into that. So we've been controlled growth, but we've got a good base, and we can grow at a decent pace now. So
welcome back to the Probate House Guide Podcast. I am Brad Woodall, the Probate House Guy, and today I've got my buddy Jon Nolen from Oklahoma, and he is here today to tell us about his career as an investor and what he's got going on. So, Jon, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Brad, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm out of Oklahoma City, mainly invest here in Oklahoma City. I've gone outside of the area a few times, but work in real estate full-time with my wife. I've been in real estate for, 10, 12 years. Full-time for, I think, 8 now. And it's been a journey for us. It was originally just something to help us get rid of some cash that we had sitting and not making any real amount of money. And now it's a full-blown business and just an instrumental part of our lives now.
Awesome. And you were in the IT world before. Well, first of all, you were a Marine. So thank you for your service there. Heard your whole story about all that at our last Investor Fuel. And then you were you got into IT somehow. So how'd you get into real estate? Like other than putting some money to work, like what made you interested in it?
Yeah. Good question. Spent 5 years in the Marine Corps, got out, spent about 10 years in corporate IT and development. But what got me into real estate goes back to when I was in high school. My parents had 2 rentals that they just kind of ended up with. It wasn't something that they planned for. And they had somebody move out of one of them. They'd been in there for a number of years. And, you've seen it. They have German Shepherds, and German Shepherds don't go outside. I was the 17-year-old son, so I got to go fix it up, clean it up, all that stuff. And one day I was kind of complaining about it, and my parents didn't seem very upset. I mean, they weren't happy, but they weren't really upset. And I asked them why. And they were like, well, we're not happy, but they've already paid the mortgage off for us. And I was like, wait a minute. So this is like free money for the rest of your life? Because they've paid off the house. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And they're like, well, kind of. That planted a seed for me. So later on, Amy and I had some money sitting and finally talked her into getting a rental. And it was, on her family side, it was, no, real estate is too risky. It's not a good idea, not a good investment. Convinced her to, but I didn't know anything about wholesaling, didn't know about buying at a discount. So I bought, I'm not joking, a $100,000 house for $100,000 retail. It rented for $1,000 a month. I got a normal commercial loan, so I had to put 20% down.
Yep.
And I cash flowed over the next 3 or 4 years, 0.
Right.
But it appreciated. So 3 or 4 years later, it's one of the few rentals we've actually sold. We sold it, made $20,000 profit.
Yep.
Kind of started snowballing from there. Bought another house, decided to flip it. Did most of the work on that one myself while I still had my W-2, just so I could have the experience. I like doing those things, but also so I would know, if we did more properties, if we did more deals, I wouldn't be able to be BS'd as easily by a contractor because, if you have a little bit of experience, you can understand that stuff.
Yes.
And then later on, left IT, got burned out, left IT, took a consulting job so I could have some freedom of my time, and it had unlimited PTO. And I thought that was cool. I worked from home, unlimited PTO. Unlimited PTO just meant I had worked all the hours I was going to take off. They were billable to clients. I didn't do that before I could go.
Right.
So to take off a week, I had to do an extra 40 hours work. That sucked. But my kids had some health issues, and so I needed the flexibility of time to be able to, whether it's take them to an appointment here in Oklahoma City or fly to New York for one, needed that flexibility, and that's when it really kicked in for real estate for us being the path we needed to go.
That's huge. As you know, my story too with my son, like over the last couple of years, the flexibility and the time freedom that this business gives us to be able to be there for your kids is just huge. Like it's worth more than the money, right? It's the time freedom, right?
Oh yeah. Because in more than just traveling, for a while, one of our daughters was on a PICC line, so she had IV antibiotics every day. Well, we had to give her IV antibiotics during school. So somebody had to go up to the school, give her those, wait. And a W-2 is not, I mean, they need you there.
Yep.
And so Amy couldn't do it. So it helped a ton. And that's really been the biggest blessing for us.
For sure. Yeah. My wife still works a W-2 job, but she loves what she does. She has a lot of freedom and flexibility within her W-2 job. But some days when she needs to be there, I mean, she's stuck. She works from home, but she's stuck in her office all day long. I mean, she's here, but she's not really here, right? Because some days, you know, she's a corporate a coach or a trainer. So when she's doing her trainings, like she's there for 2 or 3 days and has no flexibility, but the other day she does.
Right.
So it's huge.
It's good she enjoys it though.
She does. She loves what she does. You know, we had talked about early on, like, you know, oh, we'll retire you or whatever. And then she's like, well, I don't really want to retire. I like what I do. And she makes really good money doing it. And our insurance is, I mean, heck, with what we went through for the last 2 years, she works for a private company and their health insurance is just amazing. So, you know,
that's good.
That was helpful. But I've been trying to tell her to go become a consultant because I'm like, you're familiar, like she is an agile coach, right? She does agile.
Okay.
So she's like a wizard at agile. She's done rollouts at like 4 major companies now. And I'm like, your resume speaks for itself. You could go do this as a consultant and do an agile rollout for a company, charge them $250,000 and they wouldn't blink an eye at it. And you could handle 4, 5, 6 rollouts at a time, you know? So.
But there's also that aspect of, and I don't know her, but I mean, sometimes people like that security. And if she enjoys what she does and she enjoys that security and its benefit, it can still be a good thing. Too many people who get into real estate think anybody who's not in real estate full-time is just crazy.
Correct.
Well, for us, that would be crazy.
Yes.
But for the majority of people, no, that's nothing wrong with it.
No, she loves what she does, and she's really, really good at her job. And, you know, she came from a family like you mentioned with Amy, right? When I said I was going to quit my 6-figure corporate job to go do real estate full time, my in-laws thought I was crazy. They thought that was like the riskiest thing ever. And I mean, it's worked out fine, right? But for some people, like her dad was a union guy, right? So like he can't think entrepreneurially because he was a union guy, you know, up in the Northeast where she's from. So
completely different mindset. Definitely.
So you guys got into rentals and then flipping, and then you grew and scaled the business. And we've been in the Investor Real Mastermind together for many, many years, and I've watched you guys grow and scale your business. So why don't you talk about, you know, how you've grown and scaled and what your team has looked like over the years and how's it evolved and your business has evolved and, you know, all that.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's been a definite transformation over time where we've started out with it just being me. I answered the phones. I did everything to having a larger team and doing, 20, 25 deals a month down to being small again. So many times we try to get bigger and bigger and bigger. We think bigger is better, and then you end up there and you may not actually like it. I mean, it may not be better. So where we're at right now, and then I'll kind of go back in time. Right now, we do about 5 deals a month. And how we discipline them just depends on what the properties are and what the opportunities are at that time. We keep rentals. We have 120 plus rentals. If it's going to be a good flip, we'll flip it. If it's going to be a good wholesale, hey, that's a good option. If we wholesale, it's mainly because we just have so many flips already in the pipeline that we don't want it sitting. But with that, we have one acquisitions manager, we have a lead manager, and then we have a project manager for our rehabs and a project assistant. And then for our rentals, we have an in-house property manager. So she handles all of our rentals. She handles our storage units. We bought a storage facility last year, and she handles all of that. And then there's Amy and I. I only spend about 10, 15% of my time in that business. The rest of my time is on another business. But we've done that so we manufactured it so that we could have that flexibility. So I don't have to be in that all the time. So people know what to do. They have their processes. We have everything mapped out. Going back, so 2 or 3 years, when everything was just exploding and we thought bigger and better. We had, I think, at one point, 3 acquisition managers, a dispo manager, lead manager. We had our own crews. We were running our own construction crews. We had 3 of our own construction crews. And I hated coming to work because I had a lot of processes in place, but there still were questions that would come up, and there were still those fires. I was like, come on, guys, y'all, I've given you the tools. I've given you know what you should do it. But there were, instead of it being a question here, a question there, it was multiplied by 3, 4, 5 times. So that's why we ended up scaling back down, because it just wasn't what was making us happy. And I wanted to not be that tied to it. Going back, my first hire, though, was a lead manager.
Okay. Same here.
Way back in the day, it was somebody to take those calls, she did some admin stuff too.
Yep.
And then that freed me up to buy more houses. And then after that, I hired an acquisition manager to start taking that off my plate. Was very strategic with what positions to put in place when.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we kind of have we run our businesses similarly. The way I do the same thing every deal. Okay, we're going to wholesale this one. We're going to keep this one. We're going to do under finance on this one. We're going to flip this one. We're going to wholesale this one. Like, as they come in our pipe, we kind of figure out what we're going to do with them based off of, what our pipeline looks like at the moment, what we want to do in the future, that sort of thing. And then, I think actually the first hire I made was a VA to help me with like pull-in lists and stuff. And then, but my first like real person in the office was, I hired a Filipino lead manager, and that was okay. As you know, she spoke perfect English. You'd never know she was from the Philippines, but from a cultural standard,
there's differences.
She just couldn't connect with sellers on the phone. And then I hired another lady, and she lasted for like a week and then quit. And then I hired Missy, and Missy still works for me today. She's been with me for 5.5 years. In fact, my phone's buzzing right now because she's on vacation this week. And my acquisitions guy, I have Call Porter answer our calls as overflow. So they're taking the calls this week, but then I'm having to call people back, or my acquisitions guy's having to call people back. So my call rail was just buzzing here a second ago while we're sitting here, because she's off this week. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot what it's like to have to take calls.
Oh yeah. When you have a good team member and they're on vacation or they're sick or something, you have to kind of help fill in that.
Yep.
You realize how important they are and how much you value them. And
right.
If you're taking them for granted, then it shows at that point. You're like, oh my goodness, our property manager was on vacation last week. And so Amy was helping out on that. And she was like, oh my gosh, I have all these, tenant things coming in and listings. And like, yep. There's a reason why we are very thankful that we've had Jamie. We've had her for 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
And
so probably around the same time.
Yeah. And it makes a huge difference. And having the right people. I mean, like you said, with your VA, there's people that are great training VAs and getting the right VAs in. And I had some of the same struggles as you did, where it just, they could speak great English. They were great people. They were honest, but just some of the nuances of the culture was just a little bit too tough for me to properly train them. I always point that back at myself. We are virtually everybody is in our office except for our lead manager. She's local. She actually was our acquisition manager years ago. Mm-hmm. She came back. She's a different part of life. And I don't need her to be here in the office. She can be at home, take care of her stuff. But she's here. She knows the area. Because we are just local. And I think you do stuff all over the country.
I do.
Don't you?
Yeah, but I mean, we've been in Georgia for years and done business locally, but we've learned to, I do deals all over Georgia, right, too. So I've learned the virtual piece by doing deals in South Georgia and, properties that we never go to, right?
Right.
So I was like, well, if we can do them, 4 hours away in South Georgia and never go to the property and do the deal, and we've got that process, we'll just do them everywhere. And that's when I expanded the Probate House Guide thing nationally. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, she's local. She knows it. She knows the area. She's been on the acquisition side, so she knows how to tee up our acquisition manager well, and it's a really good fit. Having the right people is huge. It is huge.
Definitely. And I did the same as you too. I tried to grow and scale my business. I had hired another lead manager at one point and was working on hiring another acquisitions manager, and because everybody in the mastermind said that's what you need to do, and scale and do more marketing and da-da-da-da-da. And then I was like, then I was so busy with, doing all, like, I was like, you know what? And then with what happened with my son, I kind of scaled the business back and said, no, like, I don't want that. Like,
time is more important, and removing that stress is more important.
Exactly. So, and for some people, they love it, right? Some people, I mean, there's guys in our group that are just run huge businesses. I mean, doing 30, 40 deals a month, 50 deals a month, like just crazy, but they have giant teams and a lot of overhead and, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in overhead just to keep the lights on, so.
Yep. It's different people have different, not just desires, but different things will fulfill them.
For sure. So
nothing wrong with it. You've
gone through the real estate stuff, right? And then now you're kind of back in IT, right? You kind of went full circle back, and you've got a new product. So why don't you talk about kind of how that came about, and tell us about your new product.
Gotcha. Yeah. When I got out of IT, I said, I'm never getting back in IT. And ironically, 6 months before I left IT, I finished up my master's in information science. But I don't like inefficiencies. And so as time went on in our businesses, I'd see a little inefficiency here between this and that, and I'd try to pull them together. But it ultimately came down to, we had a CRM, we had a phone system, and they interacted, but not perfect. But then once we got a property under contract, the CRM piece fell off, and we went over to a project management software, and we end up with, well, what's the year of the roof? Well, I don't know. I need to find out in CRM. Well, not everybody had licenses to the CRM because it costs every month for them. So we'd have to wait for somebody to be available to go in and look at it and see. It was just this big cluster. So I started pulling things together and making things more efficient for our team. I had no intentions. I had specifically, when Amy brought it up the first time of making Pete available for other people, I was like, no, absolutely not. I don't want to have to, nope. Customers are great, but I don't want to deal with, well, I wish you would do this. I wish you would do that. I want this to be the way I want to work. And that's it.
Yep.
Eventually, she and other people at Investor Field wore me down. It made me realize the problems I'm having, that I was having at that point, we all have.
Yep.
Even people who are just a 1 or 2 person team have these problems. So this was back when we were doing 20, 25 deals a month, decided, let's give it a go. Hired a project manager and several developers, and we started developing Pete. And now it runs basically all of our business. I mean, our phones come through there, our leads, all of our reporting, our KPIs. We don't have to spend time going back and counting calls or counting text messages. It's all right there in one piece. It puts it up on a dashboard. Everybody has their own dashboard so they can see what KPIs are most important to them. And then it takes from when the lead comes in, it follows the property all the way until we're done with it, whether that's we sell it as a flip or a wholesale or a wholesale, or it becomes a rental, it goes over to a rental phase. We keep it all there. So it's not a CRM it's not a true CRM. The CRM basically sits around the customer, and then the product is separate.
Correct.
Pete focuses on the property and then the lifestyle or the life cycle of the property itself. And it's just for efficiency.
Sure. And it's all kind of all in one place, which is huge because you're right. We have all these different systems and subscriptions, and you can integrate things with Zapier and stuff, but like it's never perfect, right?
No.
So,
no.
And KPI is huge.
Yeah. I found out at one point that my team, not at one sit or one go all at once, but throughout the course of a day, we're spending 30 minutes calculating and keeping track of their KPIs. Because it was, every time this happened, they'd open up the spreadsheet and put it in. I was like, I'm paying you for 30 minutes a day just to track your KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is already in software.
Right.
The CRM that I was using at that time was very task-based.
Uh-huh.
but there was no way to see anything once a task was completed. Once it was completed, it was gone.
Huh.
Like, I want to know how many tasks this person completed.
Sure.
Couldn't do it. And when I asked, feedback about it, I just deaf ears. Nope, that's not the way we do things. I was like, okay, I understand software can sometimes say, that's not our plans, but it was just not even we'll consider it, or, what made you think that?
Right.
So that kind of puts there. I mean, we have workflows that take or put business automation in place, kind of like what you would do with, say, if you're pulling in different areas.
Yep.
It's all in one place if you're not having to jump around. And we're able to put our processes for our businesses into Pete, so we're not having to pull up a manual or anything else like that all the time.
Oh, so you're like kind of was it Trainual, like one of the systems like that? Your KP or your SOPs are like built in there and set up in there, basically.
The application of them is
right.
So, for instance, if we close on a property, if the when we purchase it, if the dispo method is a flip, then it automatically moves into the rehab phase. Tasks get created that are supposed to be created just automatically. If it's we close on it and it's a rental with a tenant in place, but we know we're not going to rent it or we're not going to rehab it right now because the tenant's already in there. Sure. We just move it over to rental, create those tasks. When those tasks are completed, they can create other tasks. So we just kind of put it systematized within there. So it's not SOPs like you would read through an SOP. It's just the practical application of them.
Sure. Which really most, people do these SOPs and then they go in a drawer somewhere and they don't ever look at them again. They're just being used every day, built into the logic of the business, because software is all just logic driven. I used to do, in corporate America, I was an SQL guy, and it's just like, it's all just command logic driven. This, if this, then that, then this, then that, that's all software is, right? Just to create processes. So that's sweet. So with the system, let's say, everybody's business, although we do run very similar businesses, we all run our businesses a little bit differently. So do you have like baked in kind of standard tasks, and then obviously you have the ability to customize them? So like for all those different steps?
Yeah, we have base templates in Pete. So when people start on it, they have their basic workflows that'll take them through. And then they can change them. They can change those workflows. They can change the logic. They can change their templates, add other templates, whatever they want to do to make it customized for them. And that's like the dashboards. When I mentioned everybody has their own dashboard, what you're looking at right now for your business isn't the same thing that I'm going to look at right now for my business. There may be a key point that you've noticed, okay, we need to tweak this. We need to pay a little bit more attention to this specific scenario.
Right.
Well, put it on yours. You shouldn't just have to see what I think are the best KPIs or only the reports that I think you should be able to see. You should be able to create your own reports and own views.
Sure, definitely. Especially with people that do different kind of marketing methodologies, right? Like some people are doing cold calling and some are doing texting and some are doing direct mail and internet. And they all have their own sort of different KPIs that you have to manage because they're all slightly different. So that's cool, man. So how have you kind of grown that? I mean, obviously, I know you've been selling it now for a little while. Like you've got a pretty decent customer base going now. So how's that evolved?
Just organically, really. We've talked about it for years of wanting to do it, then doing it. And then once it was available, we put it out there. We became a sponsor or a vendor at Investor Fuel. That helped. So people saw it as actual legitimate, not just a side project.
Yeah.
But just word of mouth is all we've really done so far. I've been very careful to not grow too big too fast. A lot of times software companies do that. And then there's the little growing pain that would have been just a little bump ends up being a massive speed bump. We've been very careful to make sure we don't run into that. So we've been controlled growth, but we've got a good base and we can grow at a decent pace now. So.
That's killer, because software always becomes like Band-Aids on Band-Aids on Band-Aids on Band-Aids. If you're growing too fast, you don't have time to go back and like have the developer go back and like redo this piece. So then you keep layering Band-Aids and Band-Aids until it gets to the point where it's like, we can't stack any more Band-Aids on this. We got to go back and redo the whole thing. And at that point, you're so far down the road that it's like a huge undertaking to go back and, overhaul software.
Yeah, we from the beginning, our the first project manager we had on it was very good about keeping track of our technical debt, and that's what we consider technical debt. If we were going to have to come back and redo something,
Yeah.
and so anytime we were talking about making changes, it was okay. Are we going to incur debt on this? Is this going to push this debt off? Is it going to make this one worse? Is it going to help? It's something you really have to pay attention to because it can get out of control easily.
For sure. So, and people that are, coming on with Pete, and I mean, obviously there's like a few CRMs within our business that everybody kind of uses. So have you guys pretty much done integrations from just about all the different CRM products?
Yeah, we have. They all have their own little quirks, and part of that comes in people use different fields differently. I mean, they may have a certain field in a CRM that two people use completely differently, and so we're able to pull it into Pete based on what they used it for. And it is a bit of a process, but it's worth it. I mean, people are generally nervous of changing softwares. Sure. They're like, oh, what happens if I lose my information? What if we do this? Well, somebody has a small operation, they can handle this themselves in Pete. I mean, it's not hard. But if they have a bigger one, we have a service that we offer that we help people go through, pull their data out, make sure it looks correct with them, make sure the processes are in there, and do customizations for them as well.
That's perfect. I remember when I switched to the current CRM that I'm on, and I'm heavily considered switching over to Pete, but then I'm like, that was so painful on the last one. I don't know if I want to do this again, but now I went from, within the same company, right, from their old version to their new one, and did the integration from that, and lost some data. And I remember I was telling you at the last fuel, like we were working out of both CRMs for a while, and then they discontinued access to the original CRM. So then we were like, not all of our notes transferred over, and the notes are huge. Like the property notes on, so my leads manager is having to go through this literal, like, we had a CSV file, right, of our dump of all of our old data, and she's having to go through this CSV file and like read the Excel cells to like copy and paste the notes, because some of the fields, like she's doing follow-up on a property from 2 years ago, and she maybe hasn't looked at that one in 3 months, and then she pulls it up and the notes are missing or they're gobbledygook and whatever, and then she was having it for months, having to go back and copy and paste out of this spreadsheet and paste the notes in, because for some reason when they translated to the new system, it was just jumbled up garbage.
And that's just crazy to me. I mean, when a company upgrades, they should be able to upgrade their customers from their old product to their new. That just blows my mind. Right. They have control over both sides. But yeah, converting is tough. I mean, when I was in corporate IT, I worked on converting pharmacy software.
Yep.
Medications, people's drug interactions, their allergies. Data has to be correct on that.
That is
so that's kind of the same approach. Yeah, literally.
Literal life or death.
Literally. So we take that same approach of let's get the data over here, let's get it correct, let's get all your notes, let's get all your comments, if you have your call history. And what's amazing to me is a lot of people, like you mentioned, somebody that a lead that's 2 years old. A lot of people say, "Oh, if they're not hot, I don't want them. Just leave them. Don't bring them over." I'm like, why don't we at least bring them over as dead, so they're at least in the software. So if you want to go back later, you can. Plus, it can give you analytics on previous, like how you were doing. Were you doing good in this zip code, that zip code, or whatever?
Exactly.
You may get 25% of your leads from these 4 zip codes, but you only bought 1 property from them. Well, that's probably not a good area that you want to drop mail on, because you're not buying any.
Right.
And having that information will help.
Definitely, for sure. That's awesome, man. So if someone wants to, if they're interested in working with you guys and working with Pete, how can they get a hold of you? Where do they need to go?
They can check out Pete on going to our website. It's thepete.io. Or they can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook. I'm the Flipping IT Guy.
Okay. The Flipping IT Guy. Awesome. Yeah.
Those that aren't in IT or haven't heard of me say it think it's the Flipping It Guy, but it's supposed to be the Flipping IT Guy.
The first time you friended me on the thing, I was like, oh, I knew your background. So I was like, oh, okay, I get it. The IT guy. That's good. But yeah, I could see how someone wouldn't kind of see that the other way. It's kind of like when you read vanity plates and you're like, what is that even mean? And to them, it's like the most hilarious thing in the world. But to you, you're like, I don't even know.
Did you watch Seinfeld?
Yeah.
Back in the day?
Uh-huh.
You remember when Kramer got the license plate for Ass Man? The proctologist.
Oh, man. Oh, man. Gosh.
Sorry, I take it off on tangents sometimes.
That's okay. That's okay. Oh, man. Love it. Well, that's awesome, man. So now you guys you're doing that, and then you're flipping, and do you have any we've gone through this pretty quickly, so do you have any maybe recent war stories you want to tell? You got any crazy deals, any crazy probate deals? This is a Probate House Guide podcast. Like what?
This one isn't too crazy, but it's kind of not funny, but one of those scenarios you're like, oh, seriously? We contracted a house back in February.
Okay.
And we were working mainly with the elderly lady's 2 daughters, her 2 heirs. Mm-hmm. Mom was in poor health. She was on board. Everyone was on board, but she absolutely, for whatever reason, did not want to sign a power of attorney over to either of her daughters. Wouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Had no interest in setting up a trust at that point. Well, we're under contract to buy it. We're going to wholesale it to somebody. And the mother passes away before closing. I think we were like a week, maybe 2 weeks away from closing. It was like, okay. Well, at least we'd been talking to the heirs.
Sure.
And they were on board. So, I mean, that was something we didn't have to go through. But I had to call the guy that we were disappointed to and say, hey, it's going to be a little delayed. The seller passed away. And his thought was, oh, great. Are we, is this going to be a lost deal because are the heirs going to go a different direction?
Right.
Nope, it's not. We got it. We actually closed that one this last Friday.
Nice.
And sold it to him. But I mean, the first time we've had a seller pass away during the process of a sale.
Yep.
Had one several years ago that passed away like a few weeks after the sale.
Oh, okay. Well,
which was nice, but probates, I mean, you can get some really, really good deals in probates. It's just, sometimes you have to be willing to do the dirty work and shake down the heirs and go through the process because so many people don't understand it. They think, well, I'm the only relative, so I can just sell it. Well,
no.
You
still have to probate it. Yep.
Or there's a will. Great. So that should make, hopefully, the probate a little bit more straight.
Right.
But people don't understand it. And then they, sometimes they'll call an attorney and attorney says, oh, yeah, it'll be 10, 15 grand. You're like, I can help you out with that. I know an attorney who will do it less and you don't have to have the money up front.
Yes.
And so little things like that help when we encounter those things with sellers.
And when we refer sellers, we have kind of a network of attorneys that we work with, and we do the same thing. We try to work with attorneys who will front the cost up front, and they're okay getting paid at closing when the property sells. They understand we're trying to buy the property. So, they're super helpful in that standpoint. Or you get the one with the will, and it turns out the will is this, written on a piece of notebook paper. And ironically, like every state's different, but a handwritten will is called a holographic will. And in some states they're legal, some states they're not. Like where I live in Georgia, a will that's not properly witnessed and notarized is considered a holographic will. I've had people that had typed out wills, but because it wasn't witnessed by 2 disinterested third parties and it wasn't notarized and didn't have the notary seal on it, it wasn't valid. And we still had to go through probate, but we had to do an administration and then attach the will. And unfortunately, like in some of those situations, the will might say that, there's 3 or maybe there's 3 siblings, and the will might say that, Susie gets nothing, right? But then when the will is deemed not valid, well, then Susie's like, well, wait a second. The laws of succession say that I get a percentage, and the brother and sister are like, no, the will said you didn't get crap. And then it gets into this like argument of, then we have to tell the siblings like, look, okay, here's the deal. You can hire an attorney, right? And you can go through this and you can fight this. But more than likely, it's going to cost you less money to give Susie some money, because before she wasn't expecting anything. Now she's going to get something, and we can drag this out over the next 6 months, year, 2 years, whatever. You can fight this out in court. The only person that's going to win is the attorneys. They're going to be printing money off the legal fees. Or you can swallow your pride a little bit and pay Susie some money, because the reality is, I don't care what the will said, the judge says it's not valid. So if the judge says it's not valid, it ain't valid. So there's nothing we can do about that. Let's move forward, and getting those people over those hurdles when they're infighting within families. That's the hardest part of these deals, is the family infighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's so much. I mean, it's not just people disagreeing. There's a lot of emotion, like years and years and years of emotion and resentment and hard feelings and everything all baked in. And I mean, you don't get much more personal than drama with families.
Oh, I can tell you how many we've gone through. We did have someone die last year in a deal. She died the day before closing. And then we had to deal with, we ended up losing the deal. There was 2 houses involved with this. And actually one of my buyers, who I sell a lot of properties to, brought me this deal, because somehow it was like a friend of a friend of a friend or something. And he got the deal, and he's like, dude, I don't know anything. The guy had died. The guy that died was an attorney. And his estate, he was an attorney, he had a will, but his estate was a disaster because he owed a crap ton of money to the IRS, like a ton. But he had enough asset. I mean, literally, I think he owed $250,000 to the IRS. But he had enough assets where that, like, the IRS got paid off, right? But I mean, there was a lot of liens from the IRS on the properties and da-da-da. So anyways, his wife, in the will, his wife had gotten, the estates, and she was the executor and da-da-da-da. So one of the properties they owned as joint tenants with survivorship. So she immediately got title to it. When he died, that one didn't have to go through probate. But there was another property that did. So we had literally filed all the paperwork. We were supposed to close on the first property, their main home, sell it. And then I got my buddy of mine locally who's a probate attorney to prepare all the stuff, and we were going to have to probate that estate to be able to get her as administrator or executor. Anyways, we had all the paperwork. We sent her the paperwork, and then we get a call the next morning, the day before closing, and her best friend was like, hey, she passed away last night. I was like, oh no. So then we had to deal with her husband's son, who they didn't have a good relationship, and he was an attorney too. At first he didn't tell us this, but I found out later when he started acting a little shady and getting a little crazy, that actually turns out, because he lived in another state, and his sister lived in like out west somewhere, and he lived in the Northeast, and it turns out that he was an attorney, and he ended up going behind our back and selling the house to somebody else. And then he basically, which no hard feelings against my buddy who's a probate attorney, but basically told my buddy that we had hooked him up with and got him set up with, you're not allowed to talk to them anymore. You can't, well, I'm not selling the house to them. I'm selling it to these people over here. You can't talk to them anymore. So all of a sudden, the assistant at my buddy's attorney's office, who we've worked with on tons of cases, she was like being really cagey with us. And we're like, what's going on here? Like, everything's been good and hunky-dory forever, and now all of a sudden, and it all ended up falling apart. And unfortunately, we didn't get to buy any of the houses. One of them went to foreclosure. The first one ended up going to foreclosure. But luckily, in Georgia, the sellers are entitled to the excess funds. So, like, the property sold at auction for like $650,000, and they only owed like $250,000. So, but you still had to go through the estate to be able to go claim the money. So, like, it's still, we had the sister of the lady do the lady's probate so that she could go claim that money and get that money back. Because IRS got paid off, the mortgage got paid off, all that. And there was like, I think $350,000 left for her. So we still helped her with that after the fact.
It's crazy the things that people will do just out of spite. But that's good that y'all helped her out, still helped her after the fact, and didn't just go, oh, well, I'm not getting it. Because so many people do that nowadays. It's just,
Sure.
oh, if I'm not getting this, if I'm not going to benefit from it directly, I don't care. Don't call me again.
Right.
So that's awesome that you helped her out.
That's just like who we are as a company and my values. Like if I tell someone I'm going to do something, I'm going to follow through on what I'm going to do. And I don't put profits over people. Like I people are always first, right? Because I know that if I do the right thing by people and I treat people right and I do what's right and do the right thing and I act ethically, the money will come, right?
That's right.
But if you're chasing the money, you're going to run into hurdles. So
that's right.
Well, dude, it was really good to have you on the podcast, man. It's always good chatting with you. And like you mentioned earlier, the flipping IT guy on social media and thepete.io. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Cool, man.
Best ways.
Well, hopefully you get some business out of this. I've seen the CRM. It's pretty slick. I'm really considering switching over to the CRM. I'm just dreading the transition process. That's the only thing holding me back from switching over to Pete. I've seen it in person. It's really slick. And the app you've got, everything's super slick and
Thank
really
you.
So
I
right,
appreciate it. And thanks for having me on. It was a good chat. I appreciate it.
For sure. All right. We'll talk to you later, man.
All right.
See ya. Oh, I need to edit this out. I need to do my outro. All right, guys. Thanks again for checking out the Probate House Guide podcast. I'm Brad, the Probate House Guy. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are interested in our new product that we just launched this week, there's another YouTube video about it. We're doing a done-for-you marketing service for probate deals. So we're handling all of it, your online, your direct mail, all of the things. So you as an investor in your specific local market can sort of be the probate like dominator in your market. So if you're interested in learning more about that, go to probatehouseguy.com and fill out the form. Thanks again for watching this episode. We'll talk to you later. Bye.